There is a common misconception that an external SSD for your MacBook can actually expand the storage of a built-in SSD and speed up your workflow. And it seems like a good solution because it's cheaper, you can save money. Why pay $200, $600 or wait, even $2,400 for an SSD? You could take this money and invest it to unified memory, CPU or GPU, but using an external SSD, you might end up with a slow computer that simply will not perform the way you expect it to perform. I'm gonna show you all the whys, and at the end of this video, I will show you the best way to allocate money while customizing your Mac. And quick thanks to Setapp for sponsoring this video. They're launching a special project, 10 weeks of productivity, but more on that later. I got the base M1 Macbook Air with a 256GB SSD, and we're gonna try to expand the storage to 756GB by getting the Samsung T5 portable SSD. This is a pretty well-known and affordable SSD, but even the fastest portable SSD on the market will not solve the problem we're gonna be facing in this video, and it's pretty annoying. First, we need to understand how the internal SSD in the MacBook works. The SSD in a new M1 Mac is welded, or better to say soldered, onto the logic board, and you cannot remove it as simply as it was before on previous Macs. You could simply open it up and replace the internal SSD, but it's not possible now. And if something happens to the internal SSD, your MacBook will turn into a useless piece of metal. Of course, you have a chance that Apple will fix it, but it's not always the case. Any SSD or solid-state drive contains cells or transistors in a grid. If a chain of cells conducts current, it has the value of 1. If it doesn't conduct current, it's 0. By applying precise voltages to the cells, a unique pattern of ones and zeros emerges. When reading an SSD, it doesn't wear out because it's just checking the voltage. But when writing to an SSD, that is when adding a bit of information to a cell, the oxide layer wears out. Any SSD has a limited lifespan. It's measured in a number of cycles it takes for cells to fail, and therefore the SSD wears out. You cannot read information from it anymore. For our convenience, we can check its capacity in percentages. Later in this video, I'm gonna show you how you can do it. This is a very rough explanation of how it works, but still it sounds complicated and boring, but in fact the principle is very simple. Imagine that you have a pencil, where the graphite stick is your data, and you have a small piece of paper. This is your SSD. And you start writing data on this piece of paper, then you erase it and repeat this process over and over again. The first time, the second, the third, the 10th, the 20th, even after a few dozen times it looks clean, but the more times you write and erase, the more the paper, your SSD, wears out. And when you have done this a lot of times, then it becomes difficult for a pencil to write on paper, and it's more difficult to read this than the first time. The same thing happens with your SSD. The resource of modern SSDs, in fact, is huge. That is why manufacturers on average give their warranty for 3 to 5 years, but in any case, you're limited by the SSD storage and something else. With the arrival of Apple Silicon, we get a bunch of elements in one small chip. GPU, CPU, unified memory, and many other things making the new M1 chip so powerful. And this new architecture provides more opportunities for using SSD. That is, the M1 chip itself accesses SSD much more often than before. That is, technically, in new Macs, the SSD wears out faster, at least because the swap is used there really often. If the computer does not have enough RAM to perform a particular task, it will compensate for this using the SSD. In the course of many tests, I found that this process happens very often. You as users don't feel it, but it happens in the background. From here, we can conclude that it's better to protect yourself and take an external SSD, thereby freeing the internal SSD from constant system violence. And you can also save money, but it doesn't work that easily. To test this, I left the external SSD connected to the MacBook so that it would be permanently connected to the system. To begin with, I left the internal SSD almost empty, with only the footage, project files, and apps. On the external SSD, of course, there's also enough free space. In general, nothing surprising is happening now. Everything works as before, nothing slows down, simply because there is enough free space on both SSDs. While opening various applications, the MacBook successfully uses the swap using the memory of the built-in SSD. Now let's completely fill up the internal SSD and check if the unified memory from M1 can use the external SSD, thereby bypassing the internal SSD because it's full. I left about 200 megabytes on the internal SSD and tried to open different applications. In each application, no matter if it's Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, Lightroom, Xcode, or just a bunch of tabs in a browser, in each case, the computer does not have enough memory and it suggests closing some apps to free up the unified memory. This happens because the internal SSD is full and the MacBook simply has nowhere to take additional memory to support the system. You might have thought, what about the external SSD? And it feels great, just chilling over there. It doesn't really care what's going on this Mac, because it's just connected to it and cannot be used as a replacement for the built-in SSD. But does this all mean that there is no point in external SSDs at all, and you need to pour all the money into the built-in SSD? Not quite. To make the right conclusion, we need to understand the pros and cons of both options. Going back to the example with a piece of paper, it's important to understand how quickly your SSD can wear out in your workflow. As I said, you're limited by the size of this piece of paper, that is, the amount of gigabytes of your SSD. The more storage you get, the more rewritable cells you get. But how to calculate the SSD wear rate in your case? On average, SSD manufacturers give a warranty for 600 terabytes written on 1 terabyte SSD. In general, the warranty of 3 to 5 years doesn't mean anything to us because the SSD will not fail immediately. It depends on how you use it. Based on this data, a Mac with a basic 256GB SSD will give you the space of 150 terabytes to write. Users rarely write less than 300 terabytes. More often, this value reaches 500 terabytes and higher. There is something to think about. So over time, it will lose capacity, a bunch of files on it, and you will have to find solutions to stay organized and that will make your workflow more efficient. There is one solution that I like, and this solution is Setapp. Setapp helps you stay productive with dedicated productivity tools and apps that empower you to tackle tasks easier, faster, and more efficiently. For example, one of the apps I use all the time is Yoink, and it basically allows you to bring the drag and drop feature to the next level. It's working like a temporary shelf to hold files. So once you start moving one of your files, this pop-up window appears. Now drag the file inside, then open a new folder and drag the file to the new folder. Makes your life so much easier. We do a lot of MacBook benchmarking on this channel and there are some must-use apps for our team. One of these apps is called iStat Menus. It's extremely useful if you want to monitor exactly what your Mac is doing, for example, the CPU and GPU usage. So if your computer is slowing down, this will help you determine the cause. Even if you're not into stats and technical information about your computer, one day it will help you a lot. Or Al Dente Pro to set my battery charging limits and prolong my battery's lifespan. Any creative process can get you exhausted pretty fast, so I use the Pomodoro technique and the app called Pomodoro Timer with analytics. It helps build your productivity momentum, block distractions, work in short intervals, and take regular breaks to recharge your mind. Consistent productivity can get difficult to maintain, but Setapp are determined to help you do so. This is why in the run-up to the International Productivity Day on June 20, they're launching a special project, 10 weeks of productivity. Over the coming weeks, they will be celebrating productivity with a curated series of content, sharing everything they know about staying productive, no matter the circumstances. But that's not all. As part of this project, they're opening up an extended trial of Setapp. Begin your Setapp trial before June 20 to get an extended 14-day free trial. You can access free experience with all of Setapp functionality, countless apps for taking on your daily tasks, and app recommendations to help you discover the tools to improve your workflow. To use Setapp extended trial, check out the link in the description below. That is, I recommend you to get a Mac with at least 16 gigabytes of unified memory in order for the system to access the SSD less. Your SSD will simply wear out faster. 8 gigabytes of unified memory will rarely be enough for the computer. Here's one of our computers. This is the 13-inch M1 Macbook Pro, used for a little over a year for video editing, photos, Xcode, Logic Pro, and sometimes games. There are only 43 terabytes of data written, but at the same time, SSD wear is 3%. This is quite a lot. For this reason, I recommend you to take a minimum of 16 gigabytes of unified memory, as well as a larger SSD storage. That is, instead of taking 256 gigabytes, take at least 512 or higher, depending on the complexity of your tasks. But is it worth getting an external SSD then? And how many gigabytes is enough? It will depend on your tasks. And the main thing is to understand that the swap will not work with an external SSD. One of the problems with these external SSDs is that they can get really hot when you're transferring gigabytes or even terabytes of data back and forth every day. And as we know, when some piece of hardware gets hot, it slows down. On top of that, if it happens regularly, it can decrease their lifespan. Having a fast SSD is important. If you are regularly transferring files, the time you spend waiting for a transfer to complete can add up. And if you work from an external drive, you will see massive performance improvements by using a fast drive. Of course, if you plan to work actively on your Mac, it's better to take up a little more storage than you need for your work. SSDs in new Macs are very fast. Even in the base M1 Air, the write speed can get to about 1500 and the read speed is almost 3000. And on the M1 Pro and M1 Max MacBooks, the numbers are just crazy. Not all external SSDs are capable of producing something similar. But external SSDs can be real saviors. If it's physically impossible to add it from an internal SSD, then your best option is of course an external SSD. And if you don't know which one to choose, then smash the like button. I'm gonna make a video on this topic. And guys, it's really hard to make tech reviews on a small channel like this. We have a team working on this content, so if you're getting value, smash the super thanks button and support us with a few bucks. And check out this one about how RAM or unified memory works, and see you in the next one.